بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm Nazik Elmalaika3, a professor of pathology at the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at Islamic University. It's of my pleasure to welcome you and to discuss with you an important issue that we face daily during our professional life. That is writing specific objectives. We, as educators, use the educational or learning objectives every day to guide our practice and student learning. We read them, we write them, and post them in our classrooms. They should be simple enough to write, isn't it? In fact, while objectives seem simple enough to execute, they can be quite tricky to write. Therefore, we are here today to know how we can create a well-written learning objectives. So, I expect by the end of this session that you should be able to write specific objectives for a learning activity clearly. And this will be through showing you what are the importance or what is the importance and what are the functions of the specific objectives, and knowing that to create a well-written specific objectives we have to pass through 3 steps, and the well-written specific objectives have 4 components. Let us see what are the objectives. Objectives are usually specific statements of educational intention which delineate either general or specific outcomes. Those the outcomes of the particular course or the curriculum or the lesson or any learning activity. Is it important to determine our objectives? Yes, because if you don't know where you are going, you can't go anywhere. And these specific objectives should be clear and meaningful. It seems simple enough, but that is a lot of information to pack into a single sentence or two. What is the importance of specific objectives? The well-written objectives provide a direction to instruction, guidelines for assessment, and provide instructional intent to others. Let us impart this out. These are the functions of the specific objectives, and also they show why they are important. Specific objectives give educators guidance and keep teachers and students on track. Both the teachers and students will know what is going on, what is the intended outcomes of each lesson or teaching activity. So they determine the direction. Furthermore, they are very important in student assessment. A well-written objective will allow teachers to easily assess the student learning according or depending on those specific objectives and gauge learning outcomes. And even for the student, the objectives will set expectations for what they will learn and what content needs to be mastered. Actually, the specific objectives are those what are going to be seen in the exam. Furthermore, an effective objective communicates the focus and purpose of the lesson, regardless of the audience. And the instructor, the administrator, and even students themselves can understand what learning goals and outcomes are anticipated from the lesson. Let us see how we can write or create a clear, specific objective. Objectives are such valuable parts of lesson planning. This adding value for specific this they are part of the lesson planning and execution. You have to plan, as you know, for your curriculum, for your course design, for your learning activity. Each learning activity should be planned. Objectives must be specific, measurable, short-term, and observable. They should be specific, and you have to use a single key result, or you have to use a single action verb, not more than once. You have to use this action verb which can be measured. The objective should be measured. This objective or behavior can be measured. Each objective should be realistic in terms of the available resources. For example, in a practical session, you need the student to do a second generation, a practical to run a PCR, for example, and you have not a PCR machine in your laboratory. Should be relevant. Each objective is central to job site goals and makes a difference in job performance or student achievement. And this is, in this particular issue, you have to relate your objective according to the learning domain, the Bloom's domain that your learning activity is dealing with. We will come to emphasize this soon. And each objective should be able to be accomplished within the time frame established for the staff development. How do you create a well-written objective? There are 3 steps for this. And these are: number 1, identifying your audience. You have to ask yourself, what should the student be able to do? To determine what, or to select an action verb utilizing Bloom's taxonomy. And step 3, to use the phrase students will be able to. Let us go further. In identifying your audience, you have to consider who will be participating in the lesson. Are they the undergraduate student or postgraduate, master's degree or PhD students? Within the undergraduate, what is the level? First class or the final one? Their background knowledge and learning needs are the same? Is it the same for students from this college and those from another one? And so on. What you want the students to learn also should be determined. What you want them to understand or be able to do is very important. The resources that are available to you and to the learner, such as the suitable available patients, should be considered, the same as the machines, the laboratory tests, the equipment according to the learning activity. As you know, this is Bloom's taxonomy, created by Benjamin Bloom in 1956, as you learned in the few past weeks. And they are levels of learning, starting from remembering up to creating. This is a modified taxonomy. Try to use the higher order levels. And these all of the cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy. For each of these levels, there are certain action verbs that can be used. For example, if we are going today, I'm aiming, or by the end of this lesson, I would expect you to create a well-written specific objective. Step number 3 for the creation of a well-written specific objective is the use of the phrase student will be able to. The term student or this word can be replaced by participants, learners, and so on, whatever the audience is. What you want your student to be able to do during or after the lesson should be determined using the phrase or following the phrase the student will be able to. And this depends on the learning activity you are going to conduct. If you are dealing with a large group of students, you are presenting a lecture, mostly you use action verbs in the cognitive domain. Also here, as we said, try to use the higher thinking levels or learning levels of domain. If you are doing with small groups or practical sessions like bedside teaching or practical session in introducing an NG tube or suctioning a blood sample, you have to use the action verbs within the skill domain, the psychomotor domain. And if you are dealing with an attitude or behavior, you have to use select the suitable action verb from the affective Bloom's domain. And these sum all of the levels in each domain. Our written objective has 4 parts, or composed of 4 parts. It will state the audience, who could be the student, the participants, the learners, and so on. And number 2, provide a measurable or observable behavior. And here we usually use an action verb which is measurable. Number 3, it will describe the circumstances by the end of the lesson on the successful completion of this session, and describe the degree in which the students will perform excellently, safely, within 2 minutes, how much of test can be done, and so on. These are examples of specific objectives. In the first example, by the end of this session, the students should be able to take a 5 ml of blood sample from the antecubital vein safely. The red color, the student determines the audience, and take a 5 ml of blood sample. This is the measurable action verb. The situation or circumstance is by the end of this session, and safely determines the degree or the description of the learning activity. The second example, on the successful completion of this session, the learner should be able to introduce an endotracheal tube to a COVID-19 patient in 2 minutes safely. Also, here we use the action verb introduce, which is from the skill or psychomotor domain. The learner is the audience. On the successful completion of this session or practical session is the circumstance, and the degree or the level of the learning objective is here in 2 minutes safely. We come back to our learning objective. We aimed that by the end of this session, you should be able to write specific objectives for a learning activity clearly. And by this, I hope you already learned the objectives. We came to the end, and to summarize and take home message, remember that specific objectives are designed to answer questions like what will people be able to know, do, or create after the end of another learning event. The well-written objective provides direction to instruction, guidelines for assessment, and provide instructional intent to others. Think smart. Specific objectives should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and within the time limit. To create a well-written objective, there are 3 steps. You have to identify your audience by determining what they should be able to do, what their level, the background level, and so on. You have to select a suitable action verb utilizing Bloom's taxonomy and domains. And you have to use the phrase student or participant or learners will be able to. And at the end, There are four components for a well-written objective. They state the audience, the measurable or observable behavior, they describe the circumstances, and describe the degree in which students will perform. That is all, and thank you very much. I will be welcoming your questions and comments through my email nazikhussein@gmail.com, and thank you very much.